to squeeze faster, but you know my watch is set faster. Like 3 minutes. Yeah.
That's fine.
I set my watch.
Live, we can hear you now. Everybody in this room.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is day 2, tax debt management, getting the strategy right and implementing for results. We want to thank those of you who came here some 30 minutes ago, and they were right here waiting for us to start this program. Abi Abubakar, I'm told, was the first to come here ready for action. Abi, you are already a full participant in this program. I can see you raising your hand. You can raise it again. Do that again, please. Thank you very much. Thank you. We recorded you as the first person that reported today for training, and it's very significant. At past, I was told. I wasn't even here by then. So you've done wonderfully well, and I thank you very much. However, we have 16 participants now, 16 participants. Why I keep announcing this is that at the end of this program, nobody will be in doubt as to why some people were not certified. At every given time, we are taking a screenshot. We are also marking our manual register with the people we can see on screen. And then at the end of the day, when we do our report to your management, it cannot be anything short of exact situation we found in the training. We cannot cut corners this way. Thank you very much for being here. The workshop rules have been reposted and reposted. I don't want to go through it again because there was full compliance to the rules yesterday. If the compliance was partial or was not satisfactory, I would have gone through the rules again. But I must tell you that the compliance was wonderful yesterday on the rules. Moving forward, I want to let us know that we are not quite satisfied with the number of people who submitted their names for certificates. You can see it yourself on the platform. Everybody who submits is on the platform. And as of now, I still have a few people who have not submitted. Not a few, about 8 have not submitted. And we cannot be blamed for that. We have drawn our line. What we would have liked to do would be to have certificate for everybody, but some people have refused to qualify for it. And there isn't much we can do about that. So thank you very much for coming to this training. Thank you very much for applying yourselves to it. As usual, we're going to have quizzes, we're going to have exercises. We request you to try and work on it. If you are unable to do any exercise or you run into any problem, call the help desk. That help desk, call that help desk falling foul of the rules. One of us are falling foul of the rules. What we do now is that we have about 7, 8 members of our team who are in different locations, who are tuned into this program. If you look at the screen properly, you will see some of them. Some people like me, we are sharing the screen, laptop. So you may not see us registered for this training, but we are here. So we are as involved as we are involved. On this note, without much ado, know that we are taking attendance now. We'll take attendance at the end of this session. And in the afternoon, we'll take attendance as we are starting afternoon session. Take attendance at the medium time and take attendance at the end of the afternoon session. The login details are still the same login details we used yesterday, and we'll be repeating them on the WhatsApp platform. Thank you very much. I think Dr. Mark Abani will say 1 or 2 things about Dr. Anka, who is going to anchor this morning. And the rules are the same. Keep your questions until the presenter asks for them.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning again, Bubakar. I'm very pleased that we're all out and raring to go. Now, yesterday we did a bit of preliminary work. We were trying to set the scene, trying to understand the reasons why we need to use figures to take things forward, to be able to make strategic decisions. As part of the process, we started to discuss what other countries do and to see whether there were any ideas that could translate to us. For instance, campaigns was one of the strategies that could translate to us. We also had a consideration of some of the major issues that seem to hold us back, and almost all of them boil down to a lack of process. Therefore, we are not able to have the correct authorization levels to be able to go forward and take our actions. So today, Dr. Anka is going to take the morning session, which is around checklists and checklists for management for highly performing organizations. Dr. Anka worked at a very high level, director level in NMPC. He's a first-class graduate, plus his PhDs and everything else. So what you are getting is an absolute masterpiece on how checklists are used to manage. This is not only going to be useful for the work you're doing here, but it's actually useful for your entire life. I work with checklists. I have a list of everything I'm going to do for the morning, and I will write and I work off them. That's just a simple to-do list, but it's still a form of a checklist because I have to check them off. Now, when we finish that session, from the afternoon, we're going to get down and dirty in debt management. We're going to go into the details of some of the campaigns, some of the risk management strategies, how you calculate your risk, how you escalate your risk, and how you set up all of these things. And over the next today and the afternoon and tomorrow, we're going to go right down to what the law says, where there are lacuna in the law, what else we need to do. Do we fully understand and use the law? But I can tell you that the only way we're going to make progress is by having a set of common rules and approaches that work across the entire FCT-IRS. When we have that, you will have results. It might be worth saying that Superskills delivered debt management training to FIRS. And a lot of the actions that have taken place in FIRS now that you understand in your debt management, Anita and your whole of your debt management team who started to use very effectively the strengths and other things was as a direct result of our training in 2015. So we have got, those of you who are from FIRS, you need to understand that we have done it and we have seen a difference in results. The places where you don't get those results are where you fail to follow a process. You run ahead of yourself and you get yanked back by your bosses because they don't understand what you're doing, or maybe you have overstepped your marks, or they have not had the time to get themselves ready. When I was head of debt management, sometimes I would call my board. I had authority to give time to pay for £50 million GBP. But in some cases, I would tell my bosses for 20,000 that I was going to take action against them because they were politically sensitive matters that would have caused an outcry that would have damaged the reputation of the department, regardless of the fact that I was right to take those decisions. You need to start thinking strategically. Get out of the front of your desk. The only way you can become a leader, not a manager, is by stepping out, thinking strategically. So with those few words, I will ask Dr. Nkan to take you through what I know is going to be very exciting and interesting session, and then we will come back to that one later on. Thank you very much, Dr. Nkan.
Thank you, Dr. Bani and Ogoti. We're in for understanding and using checklists. Yesterday, in the course of this discussion and training program, we have discussed process improvement strategies. And checklist happens to be one of the strategies for process improvement. It might look so simple, but then usually generates very, very significant results. As we get into the business of this discussion, you'll get to see what exactly I'm referring to. Now, this is what we shall be talking about: why systems fail, why do some organizations fail, and then the consequences of failure, and then how checklists can help to mitigate the situation, and then we do a self-assessment. Do we have a checklist for our different processes and for an organization? And then how do we develop the checklist? And then we take it up from there. Now, I started by saying, why do systems fail? Why do organizations fail? Some systems fail because of ignorance. People do not know, and they don't want to know. And that is why organizations like yours are setting up this training program, this capacity building program, so that people can be brought up to speed with the vision and mission of the organization. Systems at times fail because of ineptitude. People have been trained, people have acquired knowledge, but cannot and do not apply that knowledge correctly. And they make mistakes. That is why at times you see in some organizations, people get retired for ineptitude. They've been trained, but failure to apply that knowledge will lead to ineptitude. So in this course of discussion, which you started yesterday, we shall plug some of these holes such that your system, your organization can actually deliver on its mandate. At times people fail, systems fail because of negligence. This can be very, very expensive. Carelessness. You see, in some of our law enforcement organizations or agencies, you see some negligent prosecuting cases. They approach, one or two persons made mistakes, and because of that, the system will lose the case. Carelessness, negligence, and at times ineptitude. Some systems fail, organizations fail because of know-how, because times are changing. Systems, environments become more and more sophisticated. I'll cite an example now. In early 19th century, people were moving on horses, people with horse-drawn carriages, so many things were done manually. Then came the era of industrial revolution. Automobiles came in, electricity came in, so systems changed. You guess what? As systems change, sophistication changes, people lose their jobs because they were not up to speed with the change that was happening. So organizations change and fail because they do not come up to speed with the changes in the environment. Now, I've mentioned the first industrial revolution, which led to mechanization of activities. Then electricity came. That was the second industrial revolution. Systems got electrified. Things that were done mechanically got done electrically. For instance, the textile industry. Because electricity had come in, clothes could be woven 24 hours. So that was a change. You can imagine those who were doing things by hand, they suddenly got disconnected. Then the third industrial revolution came with computers. The advent of computers and automation. That is the third industrial revolution. Organizations that failed to absorb or key into the technology of computing saw themselves being disconnected, and of course, the consequences were bizarre for them. I now find organizations with local area network, some have wide area network, linking up their systems. We're still developing the case why organizations need checklists. And now, from computing, we now have come to the fourth industrial revolution, known as digitalization. Now, so some people old enough, 10 years ago, going to the bank meant a whole day's business to go and collect your salary. But now, you don't even have to move from your house. You can make transfers from the palm, from your laptop, or from your telephone. We're talking of era of digitalization. So you can imagine the organizations that were linked manually, what has become of them. You can imagine systems, or you don't hear of stenographers anymore. People were trained to do shorthand. Copy typists, those era is gone. So we are looking at sophistication, how systems have evolved, and how organizations have to prevent themselves from failure. In fact, what I've just described is a whole lecture on itself known as disruptive innovations. So when you talk of disruptive innovations, organizations are planning how to be ahead so that they do not get disconnected or caught up with disruptive innovations. So systems like yours have to be up to speed with know-how. They have to be up to speed with technology. So systems again fail because of absence or lack of capacity. And that is why the organization needs to be commended for taking advantage that in spite of COVID, they're training their staff. They're beefing up the knowledge level of the staff. Tomorrow's world is a knowledge-based economy. And a system that does not build knowledge in its staff, which constitutes the most greatest assets of the organization. If you don't build capacity in your staff, you're doomed and you're down to failure. So we just looked at, in a nutshell, organization failure, how systems fail and why they fail. Technology is there, human element is there, poor maintenance culture, and attitude. Yesterday, we stressed on the need for attitude. Part of the workshop lessons here is for you to cultivate a positive attitude to knowledge. You learn, you unlearn, you relearn things. And how do you do that? By having an open mind. Let's not live and have a culture of denial, being defensive. No, and when you go for training, when you go for capacity building workshops, you must cultivate an open mind. There is no training that is a waste of time. Always look for something to take away. At Superskills, we ensure that most of our training programs are memorable. Something, you have to have something that you remember. They are novel. There must be something new. And most of our trainings are emotional. We connect with the heart. We make sure that we let you see the benefits of why your organization is sending you for this training program. So in a nutshell, systems, organization fail, ignorance is there, ineptitude, failure to apply what you have learned correctly, Negligence, you know something, but because you did not apply the rules, you didn't do due diligence, then negligence came in and carelessness came in. People and systems failed because they were not up to speed with the changes in the environment and absence of capacity. Now that is where we are. We're trying to build capacity. Okay, in times past, people have been governed by ignorance. We've said so. If you cast your mind back, so many millions of people died because of malaria. They didn't know that it was mosquito that was transmitting the negative vibes that was leading to people to die. Hypertension, I even know of a medical doctor that fainted so many years ago. They didn't know he was hypertensive and they attributed it to witchcraft. When HIV/AIDS came in, people were dying. It was attributed to witchcraft. We're looking at how societies have been governed by ignorance. And to a large extent, science has helped to reduce this level of ignorance. Now, consequences of failure. These are consequences of failure. At times it leads to very emotional death. Talking of accidents, I mean, when you talk of some industries that have zero tolerance for errors, like when you talk of the aviation industry or oil and gas industry, these are organizations that have zero tolerance for errors. So such organizations operate with very, very clear-cut systems, procedures, checklists. All those are very detailed and every individual knows what is expected of him at any point in time. Consequences of failure include injury, include financial losses, and then of course you have image and credibility issues. It can now be referred, some organizations are referred to as non-performing organizations because they have credibility issues. And when you talk of financial losses, it could arise from carelessness, from ineptitude, from failed processes and procedures. And this is what we're trying to prevent as much as possible. And so that brings us to the subject matter of checklists. Checklists is something that has been developed to make sure that organizations function in a manner that is optimal. A checklist is a type of informational job aid used to reduce failure by compensating for potential limits of human memory and attention. It helps to ensure consistency and completeness in carrying out a task. In the course of the discussions yesterday, the lead presenter, Dr. Barney, kept mentioning checklists. Checklists in the course of perhaps your registration. You desire, or maybe you have a checklist. In the course of enforcement, before you go out for enforcement, you need a checklist. Have we done our due diligence? Are we sure that this activity, this operation will not fail? In the case of tax debt management, you need a checklist to ensure that the customer you're approaching, that certainly that you're bound to achieve your objective. Now, before we go into details, let me tell us a little bit about the origin of checklists. For those who are frequent flyers, you know, when you get into a plane, you hear the pilot oftentimes, before the plane takes off, the main pilot will talk to the co-pilot, systems pressure. The co-pilot will answer, checked. Tire pressure. The co-pilot will answer, checked. Check that doors are on automatic. Somebody will answer, doors are on automatic. They have a checklist. Before taxiing, there's a checklist for taxiing. There's a checklist for taking off. There's a checklist for landing. There's a checklist for when the plane lands and people are coming out. They make sure that those processes are rigorously followed. And that's why I mentioned some organizations that have zero tolerance for error. So the origin, why did the aviation industry start with checklists? It happened in 1935. 1935. The pilot involved was the most experienced pilot of the US Air Force. His name was Major Hill. He was the chief test pilot of the US Army Air Corps. And he had flown 60 different types of planes. 60 different types of planes. And the test flight was a 4-engine prototype bomber built to address the Air Corps' latest contract. They are expecting a contract from Boeing. So for that test flight, on board was the manufacturer's test pilot and 3 observers. Major Hill and his co-pilot, they took off. The plane taxied all right, it took off. And of course, it was a test pilot in the full glare of Boeing people, the top brass of the industry and the Air Force. Upon takeoff, the Boeing 299 suddenly pitched. It climbed about 200 feet, stalled, and crashed and caught fire in the presence of all the visitors. It was a test flight, mind you. It took off, climbed 200 feet, and crashed. The test pilot, the most experienced pilot in the US Air Force, he died. This was going to be a contract for Boeing. Boeing had been the favorite to provide the new bomber. You know what? The accident investigation team, they looked at everything and said that the new design of the aircraft was too complicated for the human memory to recall. The design of the aircraft was too complicated for the human memory to recall everything. So Boeing persisted with the design, and they eventually adopted it as the design for Bomber 17. And at the end of the day, they developed this checklist, and this same aircraft, this same model, went ahead and flew 18 million miles without any accidents. It was instrumental for the US winning the Second World War because it was used. They flew 12,500 flights, 12,500 bomber flights, 18 million miles with no accident because they developed a checklist. That is the origin of checklists. Make sure that the system does not fail. So I want you to situate this to your jobs, either at the registration desk, either at the enforcement desk, at the recovery desk, tax debt recovery desk. Situate yourself. Do we have checklists for all these different processes? How do we ensure that when we go out, we achieve 100% success? In tax debt management, which we have been talking about, the CBN, and I'm sure all of you, you know about KYC. Know your customer. You have to know your customer. It is very key. Yesterday we discussed, try to find out the size of the problem. Dr. Bani gave a quiz. Do you know the size of your debt? That is very important, because in knowing your customer and tax debt management, you have to define the problem. You have to measure the problem. We're in an era where decisions are taken using data. In fact, that is when you, maybe at the end of this program, if you know about 6 Sigma. 6 Sigma has to do with data-driven decision process. Data-driven decision-making process. It ensures that when you make a decision, you're sure you're right 99.9% of the time. It's based on data. So you have to measure the problem. You have to be able to analyze your problem. You have to be able to be in a position to improve the process. These are some of the steps for which checklist is known. You develop a checklist and ensure that all parties, all members of the team are on the same page. So checklists provide the minimum necessary steps for an activity or a process. They are quick and simple tools aimed at buttressing the skills of expert professionals. Nobody says that you do not have the skills, but it's always better to put the steps down on paper. I give a practical example from my own experience and background. In the oil and gas sector, we discovered that suppliers, most times when they brought chemicals or they brought pumps and things to supply to the refinery, they were rejected. And why were they rejected? We discovered that there were flaws in the process. The supplier was not aware of our expectations, of our needs. So we developed a checklist, which we discussed with the stakeholders, the suppliers, and that brought to the barest minimum the level of rejection of items. I give this example because when you reject an item, at times it can lead to a shutdown. And when you shut down a refinery, it leads to colossal losses on a daily basis. Number one, we developed a checklist. If a supplier is coming, number one, you have to have a way bill. You have to have an approved local purchase order. If you're bringing a chemical, you must have a certificate of quality for that chemical. You must have a material safety data sheet for that chemical, specifying the shelf life of that chemical. The system says, look, if you're supplying a chemical, it must have a shelf life at the point of supply of a minimum of 1 year. All these were put down on paper, discussed with the stakeholders, and every person was on the same page. And we reduced the failures to the barest minimum. So I want you to picture yourself, situate yourself in your various desks, in your various assignments. Where do you have challenges in dealing with taxpayers? Do we have a workable checklist whereby the person paying tax is aware of his obligations, is aware of your own mandate? Every person must be at the same page because we're all working towards a common goal. So checklist, again, we're looking at the benefits of checklists. It compensates for faulty memory and distractions. It helps for memory recall. For instance, you want to go for tax enforcement. You discuss with your team. You have a checklist. You know where you're going. Does the customer have a verifiable address? Does he have a phone number that you can validate? Does he have a tax clearance certificate for the previous year? You develop checklists for all these activities so that by the time you're approaching the customer, you've done your due diligence, you have all the necessary information at your fingertips to take a decision. So checklists offer avenues for process validation and verification. It instills discipline for higher performance. Like I said, when you recall the experience of the pilot, the best test pilot of the US Air Force, he forgot to engage the landing gear. That was what happened. It instills discipline. Experienced personnel often gloss over certain precautions. Like you want to travel, or maybe you're in the plane, you forget to wear your seatbelt. You forget to wash your hands before surgery, like in the medical system. Or you forget to wash your hands before eating, for those of us who eat with our hands. Or even in these days of COVID, the part of the protocol for COVID is wash your hands as many times as possible. It ensures and minimizes the risk of infection. So these are some of the basic things which checklist helps to do. It establishes a higher standard of baseline performance. It helps to avoid failure and ensures that small but critical steps are not overlooked. You see, I give practical examples, like some of the people who are contesting for elections. They need to have a checklist to know that their certificate is at variance with when they did NYS. These are some of the things that lawyers look out for. Somebody went to prison because of a small careless and something they overlooked. Failure, it ensures that you avoid failure. Small but critical steps are not overlooked. It improves communication and coordination and clearly defines responsibility for the various processes. I give another example. Yesterday on television, They were trying to fix a bridge somewhere in Kaduna State. And they said, oh, in the course of excavating to fix the bridge, they damaged all the cables, underground cables in the area, and disconnected the people from MTN, the Tisalat, and also power. If they had a checklist, that would not have arisen. Because when you go for excavation, it's a teamwork. There should be a checklist. Are there any underground cables in this environment? How deep are they? What is the depth? That defines, the civil engineer will now know to what extent they will go. So it improves communication and coordination, defining responsibility for the various processes. Checklists help and enhance the probability for success, making priorities clearer and prompt, and it prompts people to function as a team. It helps and ensures the probability of success, makes priorities clearer, and prompts people to function as a team. I'm sure in your organization, you have teams. When you want to go for activities, you set up teams and ensure that activities are clearly defined as per the checklist definition. It enhances organizational efficiency at the end of the day. Now we look at some organizations that have tried to use checklists. But before then, let me tell us some of the key objectives for using checklists. I've said so already. It defines a foundation. It provides a foundation for overcoming any psychological or physical condition. When you have a checklist, whether you're stressed, whether you're angry or not, it's a system, it's a process. It provides a standard foundation for overcoming any psychological or physical condition. It allows for mutual supervision. It allows for mutual supervision, cross-checking among team members. That is why you hear the pilot always talking to the co-pilot. Check oil pressure, you will say checked. I always get impressed when I'm in the plane. You see, they'll say, cabin operators check that doors are on automatic. And they will physically go and check that doors are on automatic. So it allows for mutual supervision, cross-checking among team members. It keeps all team members in the loop. If you're going for tax enforcement, you sit down with the checklist. Every person, every member of the team is aware of the mission, is aware of the objective, is aware of how much it's involved, is aware of how critical that assignment is. So all members are on the loop. So it keeps all team members alert. It also dictates and specifies duties for each member in order to facilitate optimum performance. It serves as a quality control tool for the organization. That is why, again, in the aviation industry, when once you have a crash, they look for the black box. Why do they look for the black box? Where all the procedures followed for taxi, for takeoff, for landing, what was the quality of the aviation oil? Everything, that is what they look for. In your own case, do you have a checklist, systems checklist? When you go for an activity, every person must understand the mission, that it is in line with the critical mandate and strategic mandate of the organization. So here are some organizations that use checklists. In a teaching hospital, for instance, they developed a 19-step surgery checklist. 2 minutes, 19 steps. So before you do the surgery, 19 steps, 2 minutes. Checklist should not be complicated. It should be simple. So they discovered that going through the checklist, it helped the staff to respond better instead of running into trouble. The checklist program was later adopted by World Health Organization. We discover now in the UK, US, even in Nigeria, if you call an ambulance, they would ask you a certain questions. They are following a checklist. What is the nature? Is the person gasping for breath? Or is he hypertensive? Is it this and that? They have a checklist to ensure that by the time the ambulance arrives, it enhances the percentage recovery or probability that that person will be saved. So you see the result here, major complications in 8 teaching hospitals. When they used the checklist, they discovered that failure fell by 36% after the introduction of checklists. Death rates fell by 47% when they used checklists. Infections fell by 50% when they used checklists. 78% of the medical staff observed that the checklist prevented an error during operation. So it is simple, but important. Critical steps so that you do not overlook anything in the course of your business. Actually, the opposite case actually happened. It was a This Day editorial where in Nigeria, after surgery, the doctors forgot to untie the patient's leg after surgery. If they had used the checklist, they would have known, and the nurses and the people on duty would have known that after surgery, they should have untied the patient's leg. And the patient died. Surgery was 1 p.m. The leg was still tied up till 10 p.m. It was a This Day editorial. The reference is there, 22nd February 2012. There are instances when surgeries are performed and pieces of cotton wool are forgotten in people's stomach because checklists were not followed properly and rigorously. So these are avoidable errors, avoidable mistakes. Then there was another example in which they were supposed to use a checklist again in entering the tank. Yes. The opposite case, again, another example. People were supposed to clean a petroleum products tank, and when going to clean the petroleum products tank, you're supposed to carry an oxygen cylinder. There's a checklist. You're supposed to carry an oxygen cylinder, but the people did not check. Instead of kitting the person with oxygen, they kitted the person with a nitrogen cylinder. And we all know nitrogen is an inert gas. And when the person entered the tank and said, "I can't breathe," they opened the nitrogen more, thinking it was oxygen. Until the person passed out, because when you go in there, you're connected with the rope. When they realized that there was no more signal, they had to pull the person out. And when they realized that it was nitrogen instead of oxygen. But luckily the staff was revived. So simple processes that led to development of another step in terms of a checklist when people were going into the tank for tank cleaning. So these are organizations where zero tolerance for error is their mantra. So there are good checklists and there are bad checklists. Bad checklists are vague and imprecise. They are too long. You can see the example of the teaching hospital, 19 step, 2 minutes only. Everybody is ready. The surgeon, the nurses, they will ask for this, there is available scalpel, available cotton wool, available. And at the end, they also have a checklist after the surgery. They count that all the items used are complete. So a good checklist or a bad checklist is vague and imprecise. Too long, hard to use, they are not practical. They turn people's brains off rather than turn them on. So in developing your own checklist, you have to make sure that it is engaging. It is engaging. People must be passionate about going out for that activity. So it should not turn people's brains off. So on the contrary, a good checklist is precise. They are efficient and to the point. They are easy to use. They provide reminders of the important and critical steps. They are practical and easy to use. So we have looked in general, about checklists. How can you situate this to your own job? I'm sure before we get on, maybe Dr. Bani will come later on, and then we'll have a moderated discussion on the different checklists that are applicable to your own jobs. It's very important that even if you have a checklist, it has to be reviewed constantly. I have mentioned now effects and impacts of disruptive innovations, like the era of digitalization. People are purchasing things online. Are you in a position to track those online purchases for purposes of taxation? I bought something the other day online, and we asked the people for their banking details. They said, no, pay cash on delivery. I just told my staff, this person doesn't want to pay tax. You procure, you book, you sell online, but you say, we deliver, you pay cash on delivery. So these are innovations. How do we tweak our processes to capture some of these disruptive innovations? Now, bringing this message nearer home, you want to travel. You have an SUV or you have a car. Do you have a checklist for your travel? You know, some of the cases I mentioned, I give a practical example. Some top director who died, yes, they were wanted to travel. They had an SUV, but they allowed the vulcanizer to dictate the tire pressure of the SUV. The vulcanizer puts a tire pressure of 40 psi instead of 28 or maximum 30. He said, oh, the tire is fat. Therefore, it has to put more pressure. And when you're during the dry season, Harmattan season, the weather is very hot, 40 psi expanded to 50 psi, and the tire burst, and the SUV somersaulted, and the man died. So for us, as was said, some of these lessons on checklists pertain to our own lifestyle as well. You have a checklist when you want to travel. Do you check your tire pressure? The tire pressure, recommended tire pressure, is on the side of your door. It says for small cars, 28 psi or 30 psi. It's there by the side of the seat belt. Do you check that you have a jack? Do you check that your spare tire has air in it? A lot of us do not bother to check there is air in the spare tire. Only when you have a flood, you discover that you haven't been there for 6 months. And do you have all those things? Fire extinguisher, what is the age of the fire extinguisher? They check those fine details. In the UK, for instance, they check whether your wiper, not just that your wiper is working, but the spray water device, is it working? Can this spray water to clean your windscreen? So these are some of the things that apply to us on a daily basis. So by way of assignment, if you are at the registration desk, when you register people for team, are there any existing processes that require a checklist? Is there any process you have right now that you can develop a checklist for improved service delivery? Can we have a discussion now?
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Brand, come on, have a discussion before we move to the next level.
Thank you very much. So, as is usual, we are now going to break to take some of your views in a moderated discussion around, can you see, the question that we're discussing is, can you give me examples where you think that having a checklist may improve your activities in the collection of taxes? This morning, can I start with Ibrahim, please? Galaxy A70, can you please rename your items, your phones? Yeah?
Put on your videos.
Yes, some of them will have bandwidth problems. Ibrahim, I'm sorry to pick on you. You're the first person in, but I know you are capable. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Hello, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. We can hear you.
Yes, I can see the importance of checklists now, because checklist is not only for organization. I think checklist can be used by individual too.
Yes.
This is one of the problems we are facing. When we are going out, sorry to say, we don't use the checklist well. That's why we are getting most problem along the line. Well, it's important by this lecture, the moment we're going out, we have to draft our checklist, and everybody in the team should be carried along, so that at the end of the day, the result will be actually achieved. But some of the, but for now,
words,
I can see, I can, hello, sir.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. I mean, the checklist is not only for the organization, it's for anything that you want to achieve. This is a standard which must be followed. It's just a rule that will guide you to achieve your goal, either as individual or in organization where one's work. Most cases, we don't use checklists. Excellent. When we are going out.
Thank you very much. Sir. Now, Shagun, yesterday we spoke about this afternoon, especially for moving cases on to enforcement, is to have a checklist, and we even will use simple checklists in order to triage our cases, in order to understand which are the cases that are actually going to give us money when we go out. Now, Shagun, yesterday we discussed the issue of people, when you go out, people will call you and say, leave that person alone, don't deal with that person. Do you think that if we had a checklist that included making sure that your senior management knows exactly who you're going to see and when, and has explicitly signed off that you should go, do you think you will have that same problem? Unmute yourself, please. Unmute yourself, please. Shagun, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Hello, sir.
Yes, excellent.
I was fixing my computer. Sorry. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. You should have used a checklist this morning to make sure everything was working.
I have done so. Initially, you see my chat. I was telling you that the audio was not on. I couldn't hear anything. I didn't know that you have not started as at then. So I have to leave it on like that till it came up.
Okay.
So the checklist is actually being followed. I think I'm following the program. I'm following the lecture, and I'm enjoying it very well, sir.
My question was, do you think that if you had a checklist that in controversial cases or potentially politically exposed persons cases, that you had a checklist that the senior management specifically signed off that they were happy that you were going to who you are going to, do you think you would have the same number of recalls that you currently have?
Yeah, like I said yesterday, you see, the theory is always from the practical. It could happen like that because what what did happen in those instances I cited? Hello? Okay. So what I'm saying, and yeah, we are praying and we are actually ready to do and put the checklist and everything that you're teaching us into practice. That is the most important thing of it, sir. But those ones that are passed, it was not that those people did not know. It was not that the checklist was not there. They were aware, they were assigned to go there, but those things just happened like that. Let's just say, then it happens like that. It will not happen again.
I understand. I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, this one, sir. You're welcome, sir.
No problem. Does anybody else want to make a comment before Dr. Nkan moves on? I think across the whole of Abuja today, a lot of the networks are giving serious problems. Yes, go ahead, Abiola. Go ahead.
Abiola, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Good morning to everyone. Good morning, sir. Good morning to colleagues.
Yes, go ahead.
I think I was opportune to be among the team members that went for that exercise. I think a checklist was prepared and we need to carry out the exercise.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, we were chased out of the office. We were prepared. So my question now is, the controller of each office, the task controller, I think task controller has every power to send. Hello?
I can hear you.
Hello?
I can hear you. We can hear you.
Okay. To send the staff to various maybe offices for maybe audit exercise or enforcement. So I don't think it is necessary for you to seek permission from maybe when you have a controller. I don't think you have you have to seek permission from maybe the chairman or wherever to go for maybe enforcement or an audit exercise in a.
Generally, that will be true. Hello. But when we do our risk analysis later on, either this afternoon or tomorrow morning, when you do risk analysis, you will realize that there are some cases that need to be escalated. There are some cases that you go ahead, but there are some cases, based on this, you will already know the type of taxpayer that is going to give you this problem, in which case you bring in your grandpapa to make sure he's standing in line. But you don't bring out your grandfather for ordinary ones that you can deal with, where you don't even need to call your brother. And so that is part of your risk assessment process as part of your process that leads to your final checklist. A checklist is only as useful as the experience that is behind it. Yes. It must be relevant to the organization. It must be relevant to the taxpayer or taxpayer type that you are approaching. I suggest to you that if you're going after anybody who is politically exposed, you know that they're a chairman of a party, you know that they have been on a very high government official position, you need to have somebody more senior than a controller needs to sign it off. If you were in earlier in the morning, I told you that I had authority assigned to me by the Houses of Parliament in the UK to sign off instrumental plans of up to 50 million GBP in any one case. But there were some cases that I would inform the board that I was taking action on a minor case of £20,000 because the political fallout, the news, the other things that will come out from that case would damage the organization or damage my colleagues' ability to attack similar people. So they will prepare behind the scenes so that when those calls come, they say, we already know, my friend, pay your tax. This is one of the reasons why Lagos is successful. Because Fashola, first of all, his first checklist when he first became governor was, if you want an appointment with him, his staff will check that you have put your tax clear, that you have put your tax identification number. If you don't have a tax identification number, you have no business talking to the governor, no matter who you are. It was a simple checklist that was done by his office. As they moved along, if you were coming to discuss a contract, you had to bring your tax clearance certificate to be seen by his personal office before you could have a face-to-face meeting with him. That's a checklist. That is driven by the leadership of the organization. It's not driven by the little person in the office who's trying to do it. So all of these things, including risk assessments, all of these play in. There is no one simple answer, but you can reduce complex issues to a series of simple checklists. So on my checklist, I am going to go and see Makabani. Does Makabani, from our knowledge of Makabani, will he be able to call the FCT minister, who will call your chairman, who will say, what the hell are you doing? If the answer is yes, you tell the chairman, we're going after this. The minister may call you about Makabani, so be ready to tell the minister, yes, Dr. Bani owes us money, and so that's the reason why we have gone, we have given him activities. His answer will be completely different from, he's in another meeting, the minister calls him and says, why are you people attacking Dr. Makabani? And he will say, sorry sir, when sir, who sir, how sir? Okay, let me call them back now sir. And then you have lost your face, and you have lost what Shegun yesterday was saying, that authority of an officer that when you go in, you will be backed up. I'm sorry, but no matter how good you think you are, see the pilots, they still cross-check. They don't trust each other. They do these things. Simple checklists give rise to better quality of service. And you're going to see it because we're going to implement some of these things. So at this point, let me just go back to the stories about checklists as we go through the day. Dr. Onka, please. Thank you very much. Write down and make your notes. If you want to put it in the chat room, we'll monitor it. I'll be off the screen here, but I'll monitor it from the other place, and so that we make sure we don't miss any points. But please keep an open mind. Try things that have a process and have checklists in them, and you will succeed. I can tell you that your checklist, even if you did one, was perfunctory. I can guarantee you it was perfunctory. It wasn't detailed. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Bane. We'll continue with the discussion. The checklist is leading us into standard operating procedures. Checklist is part of an SOP for organization. Before we go into the details of standard operating procedure, let me give us an example again of checklist for politically exposed persons. You know, today, if our president, General Buhari, wants to see Mr. Donald Trump, there are 61 steps on the checklist. Any head of state who wants to see Donald Trump, there are 61 items on the checklist. What is he coming for? What is our trade balance? How many Americans are living in that place? What are we doing there? Blah, blah. 61 of them must be answered correctly before they schedule an appointment for you to see Donald Trump. So these are very, very key issues. He just made a point that before you approach some person who is politically exposed, you need details of that checklist such that you can continue to have credible image in before such persons. So having said that, checklist is part of a standard operating procedure. I gave an example of how they are fixing a bridge, and in the course of solving that problem, they have disconnected an entire community. No electricity, no telephones, because there was no SOP, no standard operating procedure. And for you, I believe you must have one, or even if you have one, perhaps it might need tweaking and some adjustments. So an SOP is one of the requirements if an organization wants to be seen as a high-performing organization. When you have an SOP, it brings efficiency in the organization. Everybody knows what to do at any point in time. I have been in an organization where the standard operating procedure recognizes the role of the security man, the role of the security in enhancing the corporate image. So the security are all part of the process. Like in your organization, some guy, a high network individual, can walk in jeans because he wants to come incognito. He walks in jeans and perhaps uses an Uber taxi. He comes in incognito. But how do you receive such a person? An example of a systems failure that cost Nigeria investment to the tune of $500 million US was poor reception at the airport. The man taxied away in his private jet, a Frenchman. He came to invest in the maritime industry. He was poorly received at the airport. He didn't leave the airport, he taxied away. Nigeria lost $500 million US of investment. We're looking at processes, procedures that enhance efficiency, that enhance service delivery. So there are guidelines, various guidelines, and various things which you can do. With Superskills, we have been able to help. I think we have FIRS in developing some processes and procedures. So standard operating procedure in a workplace is a set of step-by-step instructions compiled by the organization. It's not parachuted. Parachuted means it's dropped. No, nobody drops it. It's a standard operating procedure compiled by an organization to help workers carry out complex but routine operations. SOPs aim to achieve efficiency, quality outputs, and uniformity in performance, while reducing miscommunication and failure amongst team operators. So it's very key. The operating word here is developed by the organization. And it requires continuous tweaking based on the dynamics of the environment. So we have to ensure, that is why in EFCC, for instance, they follow processes, they follow procedure. When they want to go for an arrest, the lawyers look for those technicalities to floor them. So why do we need procedures? Organizations that want to become world-class, best in their industry, it's a requirement. Procedures protect processes. That's why when you talk of, did you follow due process? Was due process followed? When things go wrong, the management will ask you, did you follow due process? And what is that due process? It's embedded in the standard operating procedure. And some organizations that have qualified as world-class or ISO certified organizations, right from the security, there's a process, stamped, is hard copy, bound, and kept at the gates. The security know what to do. You enter the reception, there's a procedure at the reception. If you have somebody, I mentioned an industry I was consulting for, all new staff by procedure wear green hats. All the new staff, when you see a new staff, every person under 2 years is wearing a green hat. So everybody knows that that person is new. They know the type of errands they will send that person. Every person above 2 years is qualified to wear the red hat. All these are embedded in procedure. Before you transit from green hat to red hat, you must have gone through series of trainings on the corporate processes and procedures. So the procedures protect the workers. In case of an accident, in case of a misstep, you can say, I followed the process. It didn't work. So nobody will blame you. It protects the customers and it saves time because every person is on the same page. Now, we have ISO 9001 Quality Management Self-Assessment Checklists. These are for organizations wishing to be identified as world-class. Organizations that are known for efficiency, they apply to be registered under ISO 9001. At times you qualify, you move to the next level, ISO 14001. So these are various quality management checks. Now, this is a self-assessment checklist for organizations seeking to become world-class, organizations seeking to improve their performance and efficiency. Do you have a quality policy? They ask themselves, do we have a quality policy? Normally, organizations these days, you have a vision statement, you have a mission statement, and then you have a quality policy. When you have a quality policy, it's embedded in values of the organization. How do you want, what is the culture of FCT-IRS? Is it, can you say it's a quality organization by virtue of the staff you have, of your virtue, by virtue of your processes, by virtue of your technology? Can you say you're a quality organization? Do you have a quality policy? These are self-assessment checklists which you can ponder over. There are systems, quality management system, and documentation questions. Having identified your core business process, how are they operated? How are they controlled? Do the core processes have measurements applied to them? Are they regularly analyzed? I mentioned data-driven decision-making process. Every work performance can be measured. We oftentimes coach people on performance management. Your work can be measured. If you have a target of raising ₦1 trillion, for instance, every quarter you're supposed to bring in 500 million. That is a unit of performance. And you have various categories, various levels that should do their work to meet those targets. So there must be measurement criteria in the performance of our duties. Where you outsource work that could affect your product or your service quality, have you defined how this work will be controlled? Yesterday we mentioned possibilities of outsourcing tax collection. For instance, some states are doing that. They outsource tax collections and then with the payment of some commission. Having outsourced it, what are the guidelines? You have to, all these have to be clearly defined. Do you have a documented quality policy? How is it reviewed regularly? What are the quality objectives? These are all the requirements for organizations seeking to become world-class or quality organizations. This is a self-assessment checklist. You ask yourself, you ask the organization these questions. And usually, for you to develop these answers, standard organizations, they go in for the retreats, for instance. They have a management retreat. They do a SWOT analysis. What are our areas of strength? What are our weaknesses? What opportunities do we have? What are the threats? And then they begin to define, they break down the mission, they break down the vision of the organization into measurable parameters. What are the objectives? What are the goals? So you ask, these are all embedded in development of checklists. You ask yourself these questions as you aspire to be a quality organization. You do a SWOT analysis. There's also another element called personal analysis. Political, what is the political environment? What is the economic environment? What are the socioeconomic factors? What is the technology impact? What are the legal impacts in our business? I mentioned technology because technology is changing so rapidly that systems and organizations need to be up to date in defining how they want to progress. So at the strategic level, do you have a management input? At the strategic level, have management defined the activities that are critical to meeting customer requirements? These are all management responsibility questions. Have the management representative and deputy been appointed? Because when you're defining quality, you need to have top management buy into what you're doing, because it's bottoms-up approach. There's a vision which is set by the management, then all members of the team, all staff must key into the vision and mission through intensive and intentional capacity building programs. So you have resource management questions. Have all staff who can affect quality been trained? I mentioned staff who can affect quality, right from your front desk, right from your security. What is the impression? Have all staff who can affect quality delivery been trained in their roles, and do they understand their responsibilities? Do they fit within the quality management system? Are there appropriate records of training, skills, and education of staff? It's very key as we move, as you progress the organization. Then this has to do with work infrastructure and the work environment. Is it suitable for meeting customer and regulatory requirements? How is the office environment? Do you have enough tools to do your work? Does the work environment meet all regulations and fit for purpose? These are requirements for being certified as a quality organization. Now, you also have product realization questions. Is there a defined plan, a process for the provision of products and services? Now, all these, you shall have all these details forwarded to your email in due course. But as I try to conclude, we need to know, carry out product design. Are the inputs to the design process defined and documented? Have you defined how you verify that the final design? These are when it comes to meeting customer requirements. It's not so much applicable to this process. Now, these are the qualities of high performance organizations. We're building up from checklists. We have looked at processes, procedures, the need to document everything, and then these are the expectations. 5 qualities of high performance organizations. A high performance organization is intentionally designed to achieve excellence by bringing out the best in people and also increasing organizational capacity to deliver sustainable results. The key to high performance is the ability to make best decisions for the organization using the assets of the organization, the human beings, its people, to deliver sustainable results. And that's why you're on this program, building capacity for tax debt management, so that you can meet organizational goals. The cost of not being a high performance organization is usually associated with decline in productivity, low morale, resentment, quality output, poor quality delivery. A high performance organization will integrate standards for excellence into their governance. And then the program operations. Organization systems and procedures must be designed to foster excellence. These are requirements as you grow, as you want to move from one level to the other. You have to build in capacity to deliver excellence, capacity to do your work without fear, without favor, and then without fail, so that you can deliver on your mandate with a commitment to excellence at all levels. And then you implement the systems, you meet standards, problems, complaints are reduced conflicts are proactively tackled before they become a crisis. This is very key, especially when you want to head for tax enforcement and debt recovery. You have to work in a proactive manner so that problems do not arise. That's why, like Dr. Bani was saying, you escalate some of these things to a top level so that every person is on the same page when you're going out for such assignments. So there must be a commitment to excellence. Number one, for high performance organization checklist, there must be a commitment for excellence by all the parties. Number two, there must be clearly defined purpose and desired results. You have a mission, you have a vision. There must be clearly stated purpose and desired results. The top management, the managers and staff must know their mission statement. Why are we in business? Why are we FCT-IRS? So we ensure for you to be a high performance organization that the mission is clearly communicated. And frequently, some organizations force staff to memorize the mission statements. Before you start a meeting, every staff must recite why they are here. That is the mission. Why are we in business? Staff must understand the organization's purpose and expectations. High performance organizations have well-defined missions, and they convey the reason for the organization's existence and inspire others to join the organization. Clearly defined purpose. Number one, commitment for excellence. Number two, you must have a clearly defined purpose. Number three, you must have a strategy for change management process. Systems are not static. I've mentioned the impact of digitalization on our business these days. Systems are not static. As an organization, you must be ready to absorb the impacts of technology. The other day I was discussing with some people, there is what, digitalization is coming with its own threats. Cybersecurity, the Yahoo people hacking into systems. I discussed with some people, can you imagine if a Nigerian satellite is hacked or blocked and you cannot access your bank in 24 hours? Can you imagine what colossal damage that could cause for Nigeria? Cybersecurity, change management. So your organization must be ready to be proactive in the light of developments. How can we ensure, your IT department must ensure that your system is effectively covered and protected. Change management process is very key, and that's why you have, even in Nigeria, in the military now, you have a cybersecurity department. The banks have cybersecurity departments. Organizations are creating cybersecurity departments to protect their assets. If you have a break-in, then you know you're in for serious damage. I'll give an example. There was a break-in of the Iran nuclear power station. They didn't have to go into Iran to do that. The Mossad, the Egyptian security, stayed on their table, and they were able to, using cybersecurity, break into the control system of the Iranian nuclear control room. And they sent the wrong signals to the nuclear power plant, and the thing exploded, which was their objective, change management. So every person in today's world must be ready for this change management process. Next thing, organizations must be ready for open multicultural communication. Systems must be open to adaptation, to get a feedback from the organization. That's what they mean by open multi-directional communication. When Ford Motors was crashing, Ford Motors in the US, they were having very poor sales, very, very poor sales at the verge of closure. The top management called a town hall meeting. I'm talking of open multi-directional communication. They called a town hall meeting of every person. They had representatives from the security, from the messengers, from the designers, from top management, everybody. And they have what they call a brainstorming session. In brainstorming session, nobody is allowed to interrupt the other. Every person had a chance to speak. And you guess what? The best ideas came from the low-level staff, who said that they overheard complaints about the design of Ford cars. And they gave examples of the particular area that customers were complaining about. We're talking of open multi-directional communication. And since top management were present at that meeting, they took note of those complaints, and then they adjusted the design. You can't believe it, in the next 2-3 years, the car sales shot up. So nobody should block himself or his ears to receiving feedback and from a staff in terms of improving the management of the organization. The last one, culture of continuous learning. In Japan, it's called Kaizen, continuous learning. It's a part of total quality management. It's a critical element of high performance organizations. And that is why you people are being trained. Culture of continuous learning. COVID notwithstanding, the organization is sending you to acquire new learning, new knowledge in tax debt management. The absence or presence of this quality says a lot about the organization's approach to high performance. Organizations must have a culture of continuous learning. It produces amazing results. In some organizations now, they have what they call new technology departments. They look ahead. What is expected of us in the next 5 years? That is what I alluded to when I said in things like this, you withdraw for strategic session, a strategy session, where you discuss your strategic plans, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Part of it may be in capacity building. You have to have a culture of continuous learning, acquiring new knowledge so that you can be ahead of your competitors. The last one. So this is a final quick checklist for your organization. These are what they call rhetorical questions. You ask yourself this: do we, as FCT-IRS, do we have a commitment to excellence? Do we have integrated standards for excellence? Have we integrated it into our governance, into our management, into our program? Do we have systems and processes that direct us to excellence? Are people introduced to our standards when they express interest in joining the organization? People at all levels of organizations are committed to meeting standards for excellence. So these are rhetorical questions, like I said. Clearly stated purpose and desired results. Organizations, this is a checklist for the organization, for your organization. We're asking ourselves, is our organization on the trajectory of being a high performer? Do we have clearly stated purpose and desired results? There are departmental heads, there are managers on this training. At every level, do we have clearly stated purpose and desired results for our team members, for our staff to follow? These are all requirements, ingredients of quality organizations. Do we have an effective change management process? Looking at technology, looking at systems, we're looking at processes. You see, we have moved from analog to digital age. We're looking at 5G. I mean, the computing business now or internet connections, they're moving from 4G to 5G in the next couple of years. When they get to 5G, I understand internet connection will be in milliseconds. And systems are busy implementing 5G pipeline system already in the UK, in the US. That's part of the American war with China, Huawei company. They are installing 5G. And the business opportunities are in trillions of dollars. So as systems migrate to 5G, are they ready for change management process? And organizations must look ahead and be ready for that. Multi-directional communication. I've given an example of how Ford Motors, in the face of dwindling sales, had a town hall meeting. And arising from that town hall meeting, the design of the vehicle was changed and sales jumped up. Communication flows from top boards, they set the limits, yes. And then up to bottom, every person buys into it. So open multi-directional communication. So these are some of these things. And finally, culture of continuous learning. This is a checklist for our organization. At this point in time, I think we'll round up this session on checklists and culture of continuous learning and high performance organization. Mr. Okay will come in and moderate this session.
Thank you very much. It has been more of your listening, and I want to thank you for listening attentively. I would like to have some comments from you on the delivery that has been made so far. I know that I've already noted some very powerful discussions amongst us, but I would like to spread it today. I have very powerful discussions, and we give you credit for that. We are happy with you. But I would like to spread it. Please, if you are raising your hand and I don't identify you or call you to speak, don't be annoyed. It's just because I would like to give other people who have not spoken an opportunity to speak. Please bear with me. Mercy, you're welcome. You made it. Finally. That's good. Thank you. You're welcome.
Yes, sir.
Mercy.
Good morning, sir. Yes, sir.
You have one or two comments.
Good morning, sir.
Yes. You have one or two comments. Good morning, Mercy. Good morning.
Good morning,
How
sir.
are you? Good morning. I can hear you
fine,
clearly.
sir.
Thank you
Yes,
very
sir.
much. Thank you. Yes.
Sorry, sir, you may not hear me very clear because I'm having some challenges. I'm having difficulties a little in breathing.
I
Hello?
can hear you clearly.
I said, hello?
Yes.
Hello?
I can hear
Yes,
you
sir.
very clearly.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mercy. Mercy, good
You
morning.
said, sir, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Mercy.
Good morning. Good morning, sir. I can hear you.
I can also hear you. And what I was asking is, do you have some comments to make? One or two remarks to make about the presentation? What? Just
yes,
one.
The presentation was fantastic. I really achieved greatly on the checklist, especially in the aspect of when you are going out. You need to have a checklist to be able to achieve the reason or the purpose of your going out.
Thank you very much. That is
Which
a
is
you have. Thank you. I don't want you to spend too much time because I want other people to have an opportunity to speak. Thank you. You've met my request.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
You have taken away something. Thank you very much. Abiola, please. Abiola. Okay, yes. Follow Shade. Follow Shade, please. heard
Yes,
you
sir.
platform. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here.
Yes,
Good morning.
Good
Sir?
morning.
What did you say, sir?
I say I can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, okay.
Go ahead. My question is, you listened to this presentation on checklist management.
Yes, I did. Yes.
Some aspects of performance management. What single thing can you say you are going to take away? In other words, what can you say about this presentation in terms of content that you are taking away? I'm not asking whether you like the face of the presenter or not, but what is your takeaway? Just go ahead. Shall they go ahead and tell us? There must be one single thing from this presentation that you want to take away.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a good one. The checklist, as you said, is a type of informational job aid that we use to reduce failure. So in that wise, even in every process of our work, it will help us, even from registration to filing. At least when you're registering a taxpayer, there are some things you are looking out for from what they are filling in the forms, even to filing, what are they submitting, as well as there's something important that he talked about, which is the culture of continuous learning. At least at every point in time, we should always learn to improve on what we do to get better results.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thank you. In fact, you made me believe that this thing was so properly broken down. And you just hit the nail on the head. But let me hear from FOB. Chinechendo.
Hello, good morning, all.
Good morning.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, FOB.
Okay, today's lecture was a very interesting one. It dwelt more on understanding the need for checklist. And it had made us to understand that checklist is a very important tool in the work that we do, not even only in our work, even also in our personal life. Was able to cite examples of you're using your car and making sure that everything is in order before you set out to drive. It went down to our work. And in our various units, there should be checklists. He also talked about checklist on this tax debt management. There should be a checklist that we should follow to make sure that we're in tune with the needs of the job, and to make sure that if applied, we should be able to get better results and all that.
No, thank you.
And he said that the checklist should be a continuous one. It should not be cast on stone. That means there should be room for improvement following technological advances and everything, so that as to always be in tune with the realities of the day. I think that's what I understood.
Thank you. We are greatly encouraged, very, very greatly encouraged here. You just hit the nail on the head. Nobody can actually stay here and give you specifically what your checklist will be. But when you understand the principles of checklist, based on the things you do, you can always be flexible. You can determine what your checklist is. And for any particular checklist, it's not cast on stone, as you say. It can change from time to time. It can only change depending on the customer you are approaching. You may remove one or two steps in it, whatever it is. But it's good for you to have an open mind. Chukwuemeka, Rosalie, please. Rosalie.
Good morning, sir.
You know, you were the first participant in this program. Although so many people are participants now, we have close to 12, particularly those who submitted their names for certificates, because 8 people have not given us names for certificates, despite our call for it. So we are not the person holding their participation. They are able to, even to the extent of submitting their names. So, but Rosemary, go ahead. Just one thing.
Good morning.
Yeah, you took away from the area of checklists, you know, and even how it applies to your own job.
Thank you very much, sir. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, I'm so happy with the lecture today because it really will enhance my own job as a taxpayer registration officer. You know, most times when they go out and some taxpayer comes in, they might not, some of them will tell you that this is not what we had, you know, but with the checklist, as they're coming in at the point of registration, they already know this and this are what they are required. Most times when you ask them for their address, they'll be like, just use anyone. But with the checklist, now we know what they're supposed to do. They too, they won't argue with you. And as you're bringing even their return, you're checking everything and it's according to what they have already been given during when they went when all these people must have gone out to meet them, especially the new timers, the new ones that want to be registered. But this is really going to enhance our performance in the office, and it will help with the communication, like he said.
That is good. Adamu Usman. Adamu Usman.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning, sir.
Thank you.
From the understanding I have on this checklist, it will ease the division of labor for everyone, making everyone fix to his accurate jobs, and it will ease the system workflow for everyone. So I think it should not just stay to the debt management. It should extend to every office policy when making, because I think is a very good tools to use.
Okay, Adamu, that is
Hello, sir.
That's fine. I was just checking if you submitted your name. You have not submitted your name.
Okay.
I don't know why.
I did on WhatsApp, I think.
You're not following
I did on WhatsApp. Hello, sir.
Okay, fine. Then it has been sent.
Yeah, I did on
okay,
WhatsApp.
I have heard
send
you.
it.
Thank you. You raise hand.
Don't worry.
You raise hand.
Don't worry.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Adamu. But beyond just commending the speaker, I think that what is more important is that you hold to certain things in the presentation, certain principles, hold to them, take them away, and try to consciously apply them. If you want to leave your office, you know, for any operation, even if the central management has not developed checklists or your tax controller, but you sit down and you put down step-by-step processes that you want to follow to address a particular client or customer, as the case may be. So the taxpayers need to be approached courteously. And the first 2-3 sentences you make are very important. You must measure your words. You must measure the sentences you use to approach your taxpayers, because they are your customers. Apart from your immediate boss, who is your first customer, because you treat your boss as your customer and manage your boss properly. When you manage your boss properly, then you go to do your work. The people you meet there, treat them like customers. They are taxpayers, all right, but treat them like customers whom you need to return the next day. That's what tax debt management is all about. That you should collect your taxes in a manner that will leave a sweet taste or some form of taste on majority of the taxpayers. This is not to say that everybody will go away happy, but for those who don't want to be happy, they will meet unhappiness. But those who want to be happy, you collect their taxes, yeah, they are laughing, they are smiling, and they are paying their taxes. That is what tax management is all about. Those who are recalcitrant, who are stubborn, by the time a survey is conducted across board, people will say, oh, FCT-IRS, they are wonderful people. Because majority of the people will be saying something positive about you. Thank you very much. Is Bello here? Bello Musa. Bello Musa, please. Are you here? Bello is not here. Bello, I want to assume that you are not here. What of Leonard Ogo?
Leonard Ogo is present.
Please go ahead. And I know, Leonard Ogo, if I give you time, you will lecture us so much on this. I've interacted with you on WhatsApp. What we want is just for the benefit of other people who are sitting and listening to you and to convince us. Can you tell us one or two things, key things that you are taking away from this checklist and a discussion on high performance organizations?
Thank God, sir. I think what I took away was the importance of checklists in preventing errors, also being aware of cybersecurity risks, especially the case of the centrifuges malfunctioning in Iran. I think that was a very important point, that these systems are becoming more vulnerable. We have to be aware on how to use them. So like using checklists in this instance, maybe like ensuring the proper addresses are in place, like using Google Maps to pinpoint the taxpayer location, using checklists to ensure that payments are made appropriately and there are no errors in payment details like the TIN numbers and all those things. Putting all those checklists in place to ensure compliance and we don't look faulty when we appear the taxpayer.
Okay, thank you, Leo. Thank you, Leo. I would like to hear, because of the level at which Austin Dogara operates, I would like to hear what recommendation he's going to make to management, because at his level, he's capable of articulating things from this training or whatever as a kind of suggestion or recommendation to management. So Austin, please. Augustine Dogara.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good afternoon. I mean, good morning. The training is very, very interesting. And the presenter is vast in the field from my experience on this training. But one thing I will point out is that the topic on checklist being presented looks generic. I was thinking whether the presenter will go dwell more on the area that we are to be trained on, which is debt management. So when he gave us the checklist generally, I've been trying to say, okay, this checklist that is talking about, what are the peculiarity to debt management? Because when you are managing debts, what I try to relate the checklist to, based on his own presentation, possibly before you approach a debtor, you now check whether that person had made any payments from the outstanding debts before you approach the person. Because possibly when you go to that person, you say you are owing 10 million, while he had already paid possibly 5 million out of the 10 million. I did not check. I went there with the mind that you are going to collect 10 billion or you are going to ask him for 10 million, while he had already paid 5 million. And when you did not do your checklist, it will cause you embarrassment. And the debtor or the taxpayer who is owing will look at you as if you don't even know what you are doing. He will look at you as if you don't even have record in your office. So on that note, he may even, if he's a dubious taxpayer, he will even say, okay, I have paid 7 million, not even 5 million. Because he just look at you as if you don't know what you are doing. You did not check from your office. You don't have record in your office on what is outstanding. You just came to him to ask him for what is not even due.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
Excellent, Augustine. And why you are being given from generic to specific is because it is up to you. You have identified perfectly a checklist that you should create.
Yes.
We are giving you the tools, we are not giving you the things, but just to show you a checklist that you, an example of a checklist that you can use. I've just gone ahead in the slide set to pick out one, which already has a checklist inside there that we're going to discuss later this afternoon. So we go from generic to specific. You were not in for much of yesterday afternoon, so you actually don't know how we managed to get ourselves back from generic to what we were discussing. This is the level of detail we're going to go into, which you guys then need to customize to yourself. So don't think that this thing is generic. How we do our profiling, what we do, all of these things, each of them requires checklists on all of the things that we do there. There is something else about checklists that I'm now looking. This just to tell you that all three of us have full knowledge of what we are talking and why we are approaching it the way we are. You see this checklist? It's not something you carry in your head. Before I start my car in the morning, I should check oil. You physically check it.
Yes.
You physically put an X. See that X? Yes or no. You click the box. Yes or no. A checklist is a list that you check. You then file for next time. So you have an idea. Now, it can be electronic, where you enable the check boxes, or it can be manual.
Like me.
But you must tick and cross. If you did accounting the way I did my initial bookkeeping and accounting, you have to cross and tick every single entry to make sure it has either gone to the debit side or the credit side. So it's a process. And if you do not cross and tick every entry in a set of accounts, when you're preparing them as an accountant or you're trying to unpack them as a tax inspector, you will miss items. And exactly what you have said, which I agree with you 100%, you will look incompetent and people will run check rings around you. So what we're doing is giving you general knowledge that allows you to understand why they are important, how you can use them. We are going to use some of them in examples. Some of the stuff we are going to go through for the rest of the day, I am going to ask you to suggest what is the checklist and how are we going to put the questions in that checklist. But the checklist is yours. It's not mine. If it's mine, you will not do it. If it's yours, you will do it because you know the value of doing it. So I think we're saying the same thing, but with all knowledge, we have to go from general to specific. Mohammed, Saleh, you have your hand up. Austin, I hope that has addressed some of your concerns.
I understand very well. Just as you said, I missed a lot of the presentation yesterday. All my efforts connected, disconnected, connected, disconnected. So in fact, even the question you sent, they sent to us this morning that we should answer, making reference to what you did yesterday. That was my response. I was able to answer part 2 of that question. The part 1, because I could not listen to the presentation yesterday due to the network problem. I said specifically there that I was unable. I missed major part of the yesterday presentation, so I will not be able to answer any question there. But the part 2 of that questions, I answered it.
Austin, that is fine, but that's personal to you. 2 weeks ago, I was running training for the Nigerian Governors Forum of 400 people online, and I could get no network in my office where we're talking to you now. I got into my car and drove 1.5 miles away where I could get a signal, and from there in my car, I gave the training. And I was the one giving it, not even the one receiving it. So we either key in or we don't. We do certain things. We understand the network issues, but again, there's a learning point for you. And one of those learning points is checking that your internet connectivity is fast. If you want a quick check of what speed your internet is running at, just type fast, FAST.com in your browser this thing. It will tell you the speed of your internet connection and the quality of the internet connection. FAST.com. This is part of what you should have as your personal mental checklist, even if it's not a physical checklist, when you're going into training. So we understand that, but at the same time, you will get the full slide set. But of course, the slide set doesn't carry the discussions that we flow with. So thank you very much. We will build on it and we will get there. But we need to take it stage at a time, and we therefore need to be all part of it. Salisu, you had your hand up, please. Sally, you had your hand up, please. And that's the last question for this session.
Oh, it's a checklist. The take home from the checklist is very excellent. The presentation is marvelous and it's quite rich. And in a nutshell, I look at checklist as almighty formula in solving the problem. It's just like a mathematician, you give him a formula, definitely the problem is solved.
It is one of the formula, but I agree with you, it's a very important one. Very important one. Thank you very much. We have only received 8 responses. If your response is going to be like Austin, that you were unable to log in, please respond and tell us, because that allows us to know as I'm going through which parts of yesterday I need to bring back into focus as we go into the afternoon session. As I've said, so just to give you an idea of the kind of slides we're going to go through this afternoon, we're now going to go through all of these things one by one. Risk profiling, campaign risk, time to pay, understanding behavior, understand and use the law, and so on and so forth. And each of these ones lends itself to creating a checklist, which we're going to be discussing as we're going along. We're going to discuss risk prioritization, how we do it. We're going to do it in stages. You will then understand where the risk is going to be severe, which is the one that some of you have been reporting, and then who you need to involve in the process. And you're going to run through an example. We're going to work together. So there is a lot of things that we are going to do. It is very detailed over the rest of this course, which means that there's a whole reason why, right down to using what is in your own law, what are the sections, what are the things you can do. So at the end of this, you have had a mini training across the entire piece where you are a participant, not a recipient. And there's a difference between being a participant and being a recipient. Okay? I hope that helps with some of our things. Okay, can you take over so that we can close down and start in for the afternoon session? Yeah. Remember, the afternoon session is the same login details for yesterday's afternoon session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Saleh. Wonderful. And thank you, everybody who made contribution. This session. An interactive from, you reduce what we are discussing to your environment and to apply it, then we have not achieved any results. Please try. Dr. Mani has just told you that if you are in this training and you have not said anything, try and say something. Even if what you tell us is the problems you are having, try and say something and establish yourself as a participant in this training. It's important to us. Meanwhile, please, we are breaking for the morning session to reconvene and start our training at 2 p.m. But I want to tell us that we will open the Zoom before 15 minutes to 2 p.m. In other words, by 1:45, we would have opened the Zoom portal and you can log in at that time. Thank you very much for being part of this training. We like the fact that we are all staying very compliant with the workshop rules, and we are all participating very well, making the whole situation electrifying and enjoying. Thank you very much. 2 p.m.
Thank you very much.
Will open.
Thank you very much, sir.
Somebody saying something.
Bye-bye.
Please go ahead. Is that Saleh? Okay, so thank you. You can shut us down. Thank you all.